the InsideOut Life Podcast. Pleasure to be joined by Dr. Christina Avila. I said it well?
Yeah.
I mean, we tend to go by first names. So what we were just discussing before we started rolling, as they say in the business, is, the multi-dimensional view of health and what really makes up, the holistic viewpoint, a comprehensive viewpoint. And we have discussed a little bit about how the system as it's set up doesn't necessarily do the full 360 to really show and reveal, everything that somebody needs to know in the short term, not just the long term, for their own health profile, for what's happening. Do you want to just kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation because what I just said, right? Like, health is simple, but it's also complex. And so it's about teasing out those different variables to really help us get that bigger picture. And I think it's also really important to remember that the definition of health looks very different for each and every person, right? So for some people, they might define health as long as all my blood work is in the clear, I'm good, right? But for someone else who is struggling, right, who's having symptoms, persistent, and they can't explain them, and they go to the doctor and everything is normal or regular, right? This is where the question becomes, are we diving as deep as we should, right? Are we looking for explanations in the right places, right? And so if those tests aren't being included, right, it's not going to be captured. And so this is where, right, people feel like, I don't know what to do. But if we have the right conversations, if we ask the right questions, we do the right testing, we might unfold the why, right? Which then allows us to put into place the right treatment plan and hopefully make this person feel the best that they can, right?
Yeah, and for various pathologies and morbidities, people may have as an underlying or obvious symptom. You want to get specialty care as soon as possible to kind of be proactive, not just reactive, because our default is, of course, to be reactive, and that's the way the system is designed. And so I try to bring the mission and the message of preventative health, and I know you do as well. And it's not easy. We have to be confronted with that as the backdrop. That's our system. That's what's built in. And then we have added to that the kind of lifestyles that we live that can distract from self-care. So maybe we just sort of take an overview of work-life balance, for instance, compared to our self-care and the challenge that lies within that. Because when you're raising a young family or you're just trying to keep a roof over your head, keeping that all in check is, almost like set up to fail.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because ultimately what I'm hearing is time. How effectively are we utilizing our time? And the other thing I'm going to say too is oftentimes we have a definition of what a healthy lifestyle looks like. And I'll give you an example. It's like working out. Most people think about working out as in I have to get to the gym. I have to spend an hour there. I have to sweat. I have to be dripping, right? And then I've done a good workout, right? So if that's their idea of working out and being fit, and they don't have time for that, right? It's like, well, then why do it at all, right? It's almost like that mindset of what a good workout looks like is the set point for failure for them, because they don't have the time or the capacity to do that, right? And so I always like to say, like, well, what if exercise was picking up your kids, like let's say you do have little ones, and obviously we need to factor that the school maybe not be too far, like it's within their community. What if it was walking to and from school with your kids, right? Now it's not something that you need to add onto your to-do list, which in of itself can be overwhelming, but it's something you've incorporated into your routine. It's also a behavior you're modeling for your child, which is really beautiful as well, right? And if you think about it too, like I think about my mom used to pick us up from school. It was like a 10-minute walk from our house. And it was like the most fun, right? Like you would kind of like dance and like run around, and right before you got home and settled down and did your homework and mom started making dinner. Like I loved it. It's one of my fondest memories, right? So if we start to ask the like, what if, people start to get really creative of like, yeah, oh, you know what? I can actually get off a stop earlier. And now I've added a 10-minute walk before I get home. And I can actually unwind and process my thoughts. And it becomes this beautiful thing where they co-create their like lifestyle plan of how they can incorporate it.
Yeah, modeling is really key, for the next generation, and to hopefully spark and inspire. And yeah, I mean, you look at examples of, I think it's like Sweden or Finland, when they did like the world, whether it's happiest or healthiest kind of rankings of, which country would finish number one. It was like one of those two Scandinavian countries. And I think they just kind of keep a really simple lifestyle. I don't know, not to get too much into the healthy aging stuff, the blue zones, but being very active in your community in the sense that you're putting your feet to the ground of the streets. You're not just, walking to your car and then, to the parking lot and then to your front door. And you're doing it as a community too, which has that nice social aspect to it as well. Let's talk about adrenal fatigue. Something that you know a thing or two about, and far too many people unconsciously know a thing or two about because they've experienced it firsthand. So in the spirit of like that kind of work-life balance that sort of eludes us, we're trying to stay healthy, and we're trying to empower ourselves with knowledge for the preventative piece of hormone health, that we fall into that burnout, and the cycle begins, and cortisol levels are elevated. What kind of advice, or what are you seeing in your practice?
That's a loaded topic in question. Because I think when we're talking about burnout, this is really the epitome of there's so many influencing factors, and we really do need to look at it from a 360, or else we're going to do a disservice to this person who's sitting in front of us. So first and foremost, like when I think about burnout, what we're talking about is that your capacity to take on something or even do what you've already been doing on a regular basis is compromised, right? And so I would say one of the biggest things we need to look at is, does this person even physiologically have what they need to function, right? The biggest one I'm going to say right off the bat is, if you are iron deficient, you are going to not feel great. You're going to be going up those stairs and huffing and puffing. And often all I hear is like, I'm really out of shape. And I look at their blood work and I'm like, no, you can't circulate oxygen in your body. Like your body is literally struggling, right? And it almost allows people to take a step back, and I'm like, okay, it's not me, right? We need to help their body be able to carry and circulate that oxygen around, which means they're going to be able to get around and not feel so winded, right? That's also going to impact their mood. So like, think about the fact that if your body can't oxygenate, which is one of the most basic things we have to do, that is anxiety provoking, right? So this is where people feel like I'm on edge all the time and everything triggers me, and I'm ready to break down and cry, right? And you're like, yeah, it makes sense, right? So when you can start to piece that in terms of just like basic biology, right? People start to understand that it's not just them, their body actually needs more support. So I would say like the iron is one of my big top ones that I'm always going to be testing. B12 would be another one. Vitamin D, absolutely essential, not included in basic blood work most of the time, right? Someone who's significantly deficient in vitamin D is going to need a very different supplementation approach than someone who's, adequate or just slightly below range, right? So this is where we start to get very individualized, right? Because I'm treating Barry and I'm not treating Cindy down the street, right? So I would say like, one is like, does your body have the resources it needs to function, first and foremost, when we're talking about burnout? The second thing too is, are you aligned in the things that you're doing, right? I feel like it's so important to take a step back and actually analyze our day-to-day and what we're working towards, because oftentimes we're really good at setting goals in January, right? The new year hits. These are all the things I'm going to do. It's going to be great, right? And then the first couple months unfold and we're still doing the thing, but we're resenting it, and we don't even like it. We don't even enjoy it anymore. But it was a goal that we set out in January, so I got to stick to it. And I'm like, well, what if we just reevaluate this goal? Does it still fit? Is it still something you want to do? And it's almost like they take the knapsack off and they're like, yeah, I don't want to do it anymore. And everything feels lighter.
F this.
Right? Yeah. Nicely put, right?
And all of you people.
Right? And now it's like, I don't have to carry this burden. This doesn't fit. I actually want to do this instead. So it's almost like giving permission to reroute, right? Mm-hmm. Which is okay, but almost like we feel bad doing it because it might mean something, right? What will other people think? Or, I failed, before I even really started, or, right? But what if it was just a change? Like, what if you're meant to do something different and better? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a really important part about burnout as well. And then support. Do you actually even have the support around you? Whether that's friends, whether that's your partner, whether that's family, whether that's community, whatever that is, whatever that support looks like. Have you asked for help? Which is a big one. A lot of us don't know how to ask for help, right? We just kind of put the boots on and bootstrap it, and I'm going to do it my way, and right? But often our dreams need a bit of help and support and brainstorming and bouncing off ideas, and and so I think, right, like you can start to see how so many things are intermeshed into burnout, and it's really important to see where, like, how this person sort of got there and how can we elevate them from where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And to consult with someone, a professional that can help you with that is specialized in one of these fields, and starting with health. Mm-hmm. One of the constructs I like is, and I agree with the community support for sure, is the self-contract. So I know that seems to be counterintuitive to the having the support, but the thing with the self-contract is when you're writing down your goal, part of it is you're going to tell people about it. So once you get to that point, you're making a plan for yourself. You've gathered your resources and your information, you've consulted, and you're ready for the change. That's like, as you look at things like behavior modification and the stages of change, that readiness is the focal point to set up the stage for making the plan, which involves other people, but ultimately it's, used to be putting pen to paper, but that doesn't really happen much anymore.
Yeah.
It's on your phone or on your wall or something like that.
Yeah. I would say when you think about a lot of like smart technology, I'm wearing my Apple Watch, right? There's most of these platforms, they have the ability to share, right? Share with your friend your data. You can challenge each other, right? Why do all platforms, I would say, I don't know of one that does not have the ability to invite friends and create groups. Why? Social accountability is huge for people to show up and perform. I remember I was working with someone who had a Peloton and he was like, him and his buddies, he has 10 buddies who would show up every day to this live Peloton class, whatever time it was. And he was like, I cannot be the guy who doesn't show up, first and foremost. And second, I have to give my all because I don't want to be the dude who's lagging behind. Like, I don't want to be 10, right? So he gave it his all when he showed up, right? So when we have people around us that like we care about, right? Not only have we now like sort of given permission, like, I want you to call me out when I don't show up, right? But you've also like, it's almost unspoken where like now you're pushing me to perform my best because like I want to be with all of you, right? And so I think like that is like when you think about studios and gyms, right? And when people go with their friends, with a workout buddy, right? How many times I always tell my clients, like, get yourself a workout buddy, because if you don't feel like going and they're like, I'm going, you're not gonna not go, because now you're like, oh, now they're going, I have to put on my sweatpants, right? It's just you take the burden off of yourself, right? And you rely on a little bit, right? And it might go the other way around too, where they're like, I don't feel like going. You're like, no, get your sweats on. We're heading to the gym, right? So it ebbs and flows depending on what you need on a certain day. And that's kind of like when you think about relationships, right? It's not 50-50. Some days one person gives 80, the other person gives 20, and other days somebody gives 50-50, and the other days, right? Like it's always ebbing and flowing as to how much you need to execute on a certain day.
Relationships. Speaking of relationships, and I realized that we want to talk about you sharing a bit of your story, but let's talk about relationships. We'll kind of keep this kind of flow here. Sexuality, sexual health, and hormonal health tied to that, and specifically cardiovascular, right? So I will be the first to admit that I had an ED, erectile dysfunctional period, and it was a really eye-opening, scary time. But there are ways to navigate intimacy and have conversations. And, so much I feel, as a modest educator around health and wellness is, put yourself aside and, other people will benefit from these conversations. Don't tie your ego to this so much. So whether it's at home, in your community, in classroom, to have what is perceived to be like psychologically really difficult to talk about, if it's sort of in your gut and it's kind of become this elephant in the room for you, so to speak, where it's so scary and panic inducing, it's a signal that we should really try to bring it forward to someone or some people. So I know for men, testosterone levels are going to impact, cardiovascular health is going to impact, and you can speak more from the women's perspective, but it's like hormones is going to cross over for both genders.
So yeah, I mean, libido, sexuality, erectile dysfunction, huge, 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 huge in terms of asking questions. Like I think when practitioners don't ask questions around sexual health, we leave a big part of the puzzle on the table. And we also don't allow people to fully disclose like where they are as well, right? So in terms of erectile dysfunction, it's one of the questions I prioritize when I'm speaking to a patient, because it is the first sign of cardiovascular disease in men, right? And so it can be one of those things where everything's all good, like check, 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 working out, eating greens, da da da. But we get to sexual health, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, you know what? I do have difficulty initiating or maintaining an erection, and it's like, okay, right? We've got to dig a little deeper. So I think that is an important conversation to have, and making sure that we're doing the right workup, cholesterol panel, blood sugar, inflammation, vitamin mineral status, right? All the things to ensure that this individual is okay. We can include testosterone in there as well. And I would say, just to kind of come like, depending on where individuals are in their life stage, hormones are obviously going to be a very big player, especially when we're talking about women's health and the decline, right? Perimenopause into menopause. Most commonly what we're hearing are things like vaginal dryness, irritation, pain with intercourse, bleeding post intercourse, right? And so there is the role of hormone therapy, whether local, systemic, and how we can support, right, that tissue. The other thing I would say though is that, especially when we're talking about low libido, hormones are one aspect of that conversation, right? I think the state in which we are living on a day-to-day basis also has a huge impact. And
you mentioned anxiety earlier. That would be a big one.
And I was actually gonna link it to burnout, because when we think about burnout, right, we have to talk about the nervous system, right? We're talking about the sympathetic, fight or flight, go, 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 do, 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 right? Which is where most of us are sitting. And then we've got the parasympathetic, the rest, the digest, the
We're so sleep deprived, right? So by the time you want to have intimacy at that time of day, it's like you're snoring before the head hits the pillow. Is that,
right? And it becomes a thing of like, like if you're exhausted, could be iron deficiency, right? Circle back. If you're exhausted, the idea of sex is exhausting, right? It's just like, oh God, really, right? This is what we're gonna do? It's just not, right? It doesn't sound appetizing. So I think that's really important to talk about as well, because if we're feeling run down, that same energy is gonna show up in our sexual health, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really important conversation, as well as what is the status of the relationship in of itself, right? Do you feel safe? Do you feel secure? Do you feel supported? Right? Because if you don't, right, that light switch is turning off, and it's going to take a while to turn back on.
You're getting none.
You get none, right? So I think that, right, like this is where it's more than just hormones, right? It's the status in which we're living on a day-to-day basis in terms of nervous system. It's how we feel in our relationships, right? So the conversation becomes very much more robust overall.
Yeah, that safety piece really has started to resonate more and more as far as understanding, because as a man, unless you're told specifically where you have it pointed out at times, you may not be fully aware of it. It's like, I don't want to get too much into like, body language or, down a path here. But the perspective on it, where your machismo or masculinity is what you want to put forward first, because that's the kind of virility piece that, kind of showcases, my primitive, do that part of it. But there's so much that has to take place before that to have people have a partner or feel comfortable. that's really critical, and it works both ways.
I was gonna say, like, one of the things I learned in my own journey of life was when someone told me, you're not a mind reader and your partner is not a mind reader, right? So many of us live in the like, well, they should know that I want, no, they don't. Did you tell them? Because they can't show up for you in the way you want if you haven't communicated that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if you're like, listen, when I have a really hard day, what I'd actually like is just space and time to process my own emotions. And then we can talk about it. But if someone's like, hey, how you feeling? What are you doing? You need, you're gonna get aggravated, right? But this person thinks that they're supporting you, right? Because that's what they would want. Like, I want someone who asks me questions, asks me how I'm feeling, and what can I do to help you, and right? So now you've got, like, it's the Venus versus Mars, right? And you're colliding, right? But you're really just getting frustrated and annoyed, and why aren't they doing what I need them to do?
Yeah.
It's like, did you tell them? Did you tell them what you need? And I think that was like such a pivotal moment for me in my life, where it was like, okay, yeah. And it's obvious, right? Like, most of us, unless you have a special gift, most of us are not mind readers. And yet it was this profound statement where I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we can mask things really well, I think, too. Maybe that doesn't help. It's like our ability to communicate and have interpersonal skills and relate to one another and trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? It seems like kind of a given. Oh, well, we'll figure it out, I'll sense if it's there or not. It's actually probably a conversation.
Yeah.
In that vein. So your experiences, maybe just like a comment on, because I think it's worth commenting on what happened with you and your health, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I did share this. And I think this is it's an aha moment, because we walk the walk, right? We do all the things. I remember how I constantly share with people, and when I say people, my patients, how like I have such a strong family history of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Like, it would be, I would just kind of, like, I have a strong, and I was very aware of it, right? My grandma had it, my grandfather, my dad, right? Like, everyone has it.
So you're specializing in that area is no accident.
Right? And I walk the walk, right? I work out regularly. I lift weights. I eat my dark leafy greens. I do all the things. And last year I was doing blood work, and I decided to ask the practitioner I was working with to include a marker called lipoprotein A. And this is a genetic marker of cardiovascular disease. So it's one of those things that you can't modify, right? It's given to you. I got mine from my mama. And so when the results came back, it was really high. And I just, you talk about your risk, right? You know it. You're like, I have a family history. I laugh because I think it's funny. Like, I have a family history, but then there it was hitting me in the face, like in black and white, right? Like, yeah, you do, Christina. And I panicked. I literally panicked, which is funny because I would say I'm a very knowledgeable person, and these are the conversations I have every day with patients. But there it was, my own results hitting me in the face. And I panicked. I literally walked around for 2 weeks thinking I was going to die of a heart attack. Like, it's going to happen now. It's right. And it was just fear. And I feel like it's so important because many of us, when we get results and we don't know how to interpret them, right? There is a lot of fear, like, what's going to happen? Is this dangerous? Do I have to do something about it, right? And we start to ask all the necessary questions. I got stuck in the fact that this was a genetic marker. And it took my sister, and this is where we need support and we need people who help guide us. It took my sister to tell me, hey, what would you say to a patient if they had the same results? And I was like, oh, okay, well, I would tell them, right, their cholesterol panel looks good, everything is stable, we can make sure that maybe we're monitoring a little more regularly, we're gonna, and all the plans started to come out, right? But it was almost because it was myself, I was blocked, right? I couldn't navigate that piece of information. And the reason why I think this is so important too is because for many of us, and I would say a lot of patients I'm seeing nowadays, right, have been DIYing their health, right? They've read the book, I've implemented this diet strategy, I've got these supplements going, I'm feeling good, and they kind of reach a plateau, right? They get blood work from their doctor, some things have been flagged, and they're not sure how to incorporate it or how to now pivot just slightly in terms of how do I make sure I'm addressing these factors. And I think that's important. We all need someone to be that mirror, right? For me, it was my sister in that moment who helped me guide, like, okay, I got this. I know exactly where I would go. For someone who doesn't necessarily have that background, they're gonna be like, I really don't know what to do. And this is where if you, right, whether it's a naturopath, whether it's your medical doctor, whatever practitioner it is, to really help you understand how this fits in terms of your overall profile and how you just have to tweak things to ensure that you're on the right track. You know, what's the strategy in terms of retesting to make sure everything is going as planned, and yeah, and that was my little scare. I laugh now, but I was not laughing then.
Yeah, can't imagine. I mean, the reality of life is that there's always going to be something, some obstacle, even a trauma. It's how we deal with it.
Yeah.
Really. What we choose as an action plan, but also like having a support group around too.
Yeah. And it's the difference between what can I control and what is out of my control, right? This genetic marker, it's not in my control. It was given to me, right? But there's so many other things I can focus on, right? And that's where we have to sit, because when we sit in the camp of I can't control this, we feel like helpless, we feel lost, we feel discouraged, we feel disempowered. But when you think about all the things, right? I can focus on getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep every day. I can focus on getting my 8 glasses of water every day. I can focus on working out. I can focus on community. I can focus on decreasing my stress. Now you've got all these things to look at and say, like, I got this. I got this. And it's a very different place to sit in. And it's a choice, right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We're all imperfect, and we have our own physiological, structure that makes us all unique, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Anything else you want to mention?
I would just say, like, the journey is not linear. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's almost like, even when, I'll give you an example, like when people start working on weight loss, I think we talked about this, right? People like, okay, I want to lose weight. I'm going to cut out carbs and I'm going to, start working out.
Mm-hmm.
And, they'll start losing weight and then they plateau and then maybe they gain a bit and then they come back down. And all in that journey, the weight loss has almost like become a sidebar, because what they're noticing is that I'm feeling stronger and I'm feeling more resilient and I'm showing up to work more confident and I have more energy. And it, that initial goal of weight loss, I mean, it may still be there, but it almost becomes a side benefit. And it's everything else that you're discovering about yourself of like, yeah, I can lift heavy and yeah, I can do hard things. And yeah, and, at first I needed a lot of accountability, but now I just show up for myself because this is so important. And so what I would say is health is not linear. Have a goal and be flexible in knowing that goal can change as you move forward, because you will learn things about yourself that you did not know when you first started out the journey. And it's okay to let something go and realign with something else, because in this moment, this is your best, right? With the knowledge you know about yourself now, this is going to be your best step forward, because you're no longer the person who started out.
As people go through these transformations, what resonates for me with what you just how you brought it together there is just like, if you today, as this sort of little bit more evolved, more self-aware moving forward individual feeling good about yourself could talk to that person from yesterday or 2 years ago or 10 years ago, what advice would you give them, or what, words of wisdom? So that's kind of an interesting way to kind of flip things and, be a big brother, big sister for the next you that's in your community or in your sphere that you can support on that journey.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a fun way to kind of think about that. And it's like, okay, I want to keep going. And there's so many things that we can do self-care and personal development on that, hopefully not focusing on that one thing that kind of can bring us down, doesn't have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can leave it there for today.
Yeah.
Fun times.
Good times. Good conversation. Yeah.
Let's do something a little cheesy. Oh wait, I gotta do it with my left and you're gonna go your right. So
okay.
and then we go.
I was worried I was gonna hit you in the face.
Okay, well, all this like lifting, we can do hard things. I gotta be, and if she's accurate too, put it all together. Damn.
Was that good?
Us.
Yeah, it was okay.